Hello and welcome back to Arelith. Right away we jump into some roleplay. If you read the previous messages you can kind of pick up what's going on. But what's happened is I've been called pickpocketing, which is a skill that you can use on players and NPCs to steal their stuff. It's actually my favorite skill and one of the most poorly implemented skills in most games. Neverwinter Nights does it pretty well, although it's not quite Ultimate Online, or whatever it is, where you can literally see a victim's inventory and choose what you want to take. Just like in pen and paper, you roll your pickpocket skill against a difficulty check to see if you steal anything, and then the victim rolls a spot check to see if they notice the attempt. You then get a random item that the person is carrying, or an amount of gold. By default, I think there's no limitation to what you can steal from a person, and it's so easily abused that most servers have it turned off altogether. Arelith, however, has made some tweaks to make it more fair. For starters, you can't pickpocket massive items like armor. I believe the size of the item has to be 2 squares or less. Despite this, you can't steal keys to people's houses because nobody would bother owning one if you could. You also get some experience for pickpocketing from hostile NPCs. So these are the in-game mechanics. On top of that, you have the so-called house rules of the server itself on how to conduct yourself. So one of the rules is be nice to people. Despite the fact that you can go around on a murder spree, you still have to have a reason to do so. So the same thing should be for pickpockets as well. You kind of have to, you can't just go crazy. Although I suppose it's not really that blatant. But a PvP, so there's PvP rules for each interaction. And pickpocketing is considered PvP. It's initiating PvP. So if you pickpocket someone and they spot you, they have the right to smack you in the face pretty much straight away. Normally, the way PvP encounters work is that you say, hello, I want to kill you. The person responds, hello, I would like you not to kill me, and then you hostile each other. Neverwinter Nights has a system for hostiling and unhostiling and being neutral to other people, but hostiling means that your spells and effects actually work on somebody and you can just click them and attack. Normally that's how it works, but with pickpocketing, you pickpocket them and that's the hello, I'm here to steal your stuff. And if you're spotted, that person can, without saying anything, they can just smack you or kill you. And one of the things that happens is that if you've stolen an item from somebody, they spot you and they kill you, they get that item back in their inventory. It's kind of hit and miss because sometimes when you pickpocket somebody, you've already got the item. There's very few ways for somebody to get the item back without that system. But it also means that there's very little interaction sometimes between a pickpocket and the victim. So what happens is you steal from them and then you either leg it, you just run away, you don't bother emoting or anything because you're expecting to die if that person has seen you. You just run away. But what happened in my case is that the person who saw me said, hey you, please stop. Not in those specific words, but anyway. I emoted that my character was kind of aware. As a player, I wasn't ignoring the person, and I was only walking. I didn't start running away. Because technically I could cast some spells and disappear entirely, and that would be a really boring interaction. But instead, I decided to have a conversation with this person, because they didn't seem to be intent on killing me. And in fact, they gave me money. So it's always a question of whether or not the pickpocket is not interacting or not doing a lot of role play that would allow for interaction, but at the same time, because of the threat of being killed, because you're free game at that point to that person who's seen you pickpocketing. I'm pretty sure other people, because technically what happens is that when you've spotted pickpocketing, you break stealth for one, so you can't be invisible or anything, or you can be invisible, but you can't be in stealth. And there's a noticeable animation for it. So other people around can see that this has happened, but I don't think they can attack you for free, because otherwise everyone would stop thief and they will just fling spells around and just murder the hell out of you. I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm pretty sure it's not. But obviously, if a guard sees you, they can just take action. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it's kind of you're kind of free game at that point. You're just like announced to everybody that I'm here to rob your stuff. Please don't kill me. So, what it is that you either get good interaction with stuff like this happening, or what happens is it's just a quick pickpocket someone and just run away and do everything to disappear. Because at the end of the day, we're all here to tell a story. But the problem is we're conveying this in real time with text. So it's not like a tabletop interaction where you have a DM that sort of says, well, okay, now it's your turn to interact. You can try to run away, but this is his time to try and stop you. Make a roll and stuff like that. Whereas in Neverwinter Nights, all the movement is handled real time and most combat actions take turns. When you start typing, you start saying, like, he surreptitiously reaches into your pocket, pulls out his... Oh, I'm dead. Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't expecting that to happen. I was hoping for that not to happen. I guess I should run away. Or vice versa. He looks down at his purse and it's gone. Where is it? His eyes lock onto the person who has disappeared. Where's he gone? He's not here anymore. What am I supposed to do now? And that's I mean, that's fine. It's totally acceptable behavior. It's just when you see a lot of, especially low-level pickpockets, when you see a lot of them run away the first time they get caught, you come to expect that. So the only response to it is violence, which puts everyone on edge, and then nobody wants to stick around to actually roleplay. They just want to do the pickpocketing and get the rewards and then leave. I think a lot of it falls on the pickpocket himself. If you present your pickpocket attempt with some sort of roleplay, for instance, you bump into the person, or you just like extend a hand to say hello, and apparently during that handshake you stole from them. And if you get caught during the handshake, allow the other player the chance to respond and interact in a way that doesn't result in everybody dying and crying about it. So, I'm obviously playing as Alfred, and at that moment, when I was doing the whole pickpocketing thing, I was disguised. My name was Weldon, and although I'd never actually spoke my name, so technically nobody would know that I was called Weldon. They would just know that I was a different person. I was wearing a different outfit, for one thing. On top of that, I had the disguise thing on, which means that whenever you examine somebody, you make a spot check versus their bluff skill, or perform, whichever is higher, to see whether or not you perceive the person behind the disguise. I did notice that my disguise was broken. I'm not a low-level pickpocket, by the way. This is like a fluke chance that I got caught in the first place. Supposedly, this blind person is really high skill at spotting. Although I will accept the fact that you have a spot skill that, in fact, in games like Pathfinder, it's called perception. And perception can mean any number of things. It combines both listen and spot. In Neverwinter Nights, it's spot, so you kind of expect it to be, well, you use your eyes to spot things. But I'm allowing for the fact that it's him feeling it or whatever, sensing it in different ways. Kind of like, I don't know, Daredevil-esque type of thing. But you're still reaching into their person to steal their money. So it's not unheard of for somebody to notice you, despite the fact that they are blind, or they have a disability in that sense. What confused me at the time was that I thought that was the end of the interaction. But what happened was I was minding my own business in my usual casual attire, not the sneaky thief one, and suddenly a familiar voice from the crowd calls out that I'm a thief. So what's going on in this scene? The elf daughter Sidion has proclaimed to the world that I'm a thief. He'd sort of made hints that he was still watching me at times. I just had the impression that was like, this is your last warning. If I see you do that again, I will call on the authorities. Turns out he was one of the authorities. He's one of the Bramble Watch. He's not, strictly speaking, a god. He still has to get the gods to do the arrest and so on. And a guard called Jadeth Dawnfire is getting pretty much everybody's statements, trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and presumably writing down a report of some description. Naturally, Alfred is denying it all. Speaking of repercussions, this would obviously lead to legal action. So the city itself we're in is called Cawdor. In Cawdor, there are laws, and these laws are set by the Chancellor. And the Chancellor is a player who has been elected to this task. As the Chancellor, you have access to the city treasury, and you can set taxes. For instance, if a player owns a shop in the city, they are taxed per the item sold. The Chancellor can also appoint heads of divisions. There's the Law Enforcement Division, which is the guard force that we're currently having a chat with. There is the Navy, which have a flagship that they can use to sail around the island. And there is the Vice Chancellor, who supposedly acts as Chancellor when the actual Chancellor is away. Then there's the head of infrastructure and trade. The trade minister is usually responsible for trading with other settlements and stuff like that. You can actually set the settlement prices for each resource as well. So cities have resources that they need or want. I don't really know why. I don't know if they spend them on anything, but they definitely have resources, and players can trade these in. They can collect them from the forest and donate them to the city or sell them for profit. And there's a lot of interactions that you can do. But the main thing is that a city has laws, and these laws are set by the Chancellor. And the Chancellor then appoints a law enforcement officer to run the guard force. And the guard force is then the one that handles arrests and enforces that law. So when this has been brought up before, where some players new to Neverwinter Nights didn't understand why they were told that they cannot cast spells inside the city, and they thought that this rule is stupid. Why not? Why can't I do this? This is a game, right? I have this spell. Why can't I just summon my creatures and run around willy-nilly? Well, it's not a server-enforced rule. It's the world itself that's enforcing these rules. It's make-believe. So when a guard comes up to you and tells you, put that sword away, you can refuse, but expect that the guards are probably going to arrest you, and you're going to be fined. Or you can be jailed even. In fact, I do remember Alfred has been jailed before, and he was caught pickpocketing like years ago, and he was arrested, and he was taken to prison, and he was left there, and then everybody logged out, and I kept logging back in to see if somebody would get me out, and eventually I had to send a message to one of the guards to tell them that, hey, I'm in this prison, can somebody get me out? And they're just like, really? You're in the prison? Who left you there? And it was because one of the problems was that back then, the prison was a separate building. And on top of that, the doors themselves were sealed, so you couldn't see inside unless you opened the door. And the problem with opening a door is that obviously you're giving the chance for the prisoner to get out and jump you, because you have no idea what they're doing in that cell. They could have summoned creatures from hell and be prepared to fight you, and you'd have no idea until you open the door. So you're just like, let's just keep that closed for now until we know what's going on. And not only that, messages don't go through doors, so you can't be overheard unless you shout. So it was, and the shout is restricted to the area that you're in. So if nobody's in the area, then because it's a separate building, or was this prison, nobody would frequent it. So your shouts would not be heard. Like there was no one there. So what they've done now is the guardhouse itself has a small section for like a jailhouse, and that's where they keep their prisoners. The guards themselves are a player-run faction, which has its own rules. So you could have a really corrupt guard that is easy to bribe off, so you just give them a payment and they leave you to it. So you could accost a citizen in town ask for their money, and then a guard comes along and you're like, hey, I pay my dues to the guards, can you just leave us alone? Sure thing. You know, there's all sorts of things you can do. What new players, sometimes fail to realize is that the rules that are set by the server are different from the rules that are set by the world itself. A lot of the time, Neverwinter Nights is seen as a roleplay environment with its dungeon masters being able to run their own little stories. They can control NPCs and create plots and stuff, and then the players themselves would follow along and interact with those characters that the dungeon master is controlling. Arelith is different in the sense that it allows its players to create the stories themselves. So, for instance, when I got caught, I was obviously reported to the authorities, and the authorities are now having to deal with it, and they're like, well, let's create a file on this person. Who is he? Alfred Hardy. What has he been doing of late? Let's ask around. Has anybody else been approached by an Alfred Hardy, a shifty figure? What was he wearing at the time? He was wearing a hood and a green outfit. Why does that sound familiar? Where have I seen this person before? Oh yes, he was robbing that building earlier. When it just goes on, and this is like the investigative work that you could be doing as a police officer. Obviously, as a thief, you can have an organized crime. You can have a crime syndicate. You have your own place, your hideout, and you have people on the lookout to distract people, and this actually comes back around to the interactive roleplay that happens in pickpocketing. So what you really want to do is have multiple people take part in it. So you'd have one person approach the victim and start talking to them. Usually a sexy lady, but could be a sexy guy, I guess. But just somebody, a distraction. And then another person comes in, swoops in, picks their pocket, and either walks away, or if they're caught, makes a run for it, and at this point, the person who is distracting them does something to impede their attempt to stop this thief. There's a lot that can be done with all these things, but it's up to the players themselves to do it, and that's why I like Arelith so much, is that it allows the freedom for the players to do whatever they want, within reason. Pickpocketing has its rules in the server, so there's the be nice rule is one thing, but there's also a limit to how many times you can pickpocket somebody per day, and this is real life hours, so 24 hours you can only pickpocket somebody once, and that means either a successful or failed attempt. However, the game, when you pickpocket someone, it tells you what you take, and you usually, the message is you've gained gold or you gained an item. And what sometimes happens is that when you pickpocket something that is restricted, so it could be a key, like I mentioned earlier, or it could be a massive item like a piece of armor that you can't, it would be ridiculous if you could just take that. So what happens is that the game tells you you've gained an item and you've lost that same item. So at this point you're left with, well, it was a successful pickpocketing attempt. I'm only allowed to pickpocket once. What do I do? In those instances, you are allowed to attempt again, because the game randomly selected an item that was impossible to pickpocket. If that happens, you are allowed to attempt again. But once you do acquire some gold, or you acquire an item like a scroll, for instance, or a wand, at that point you need to stop. You need to mark down the hour that you took this item, and then you need to know who you stole it from. You can still steal from other people, but if you steal again, you're breaking the server rules, which are different, which can get you banned. Usually it's a talking to with a DM. The reason for this is because, like I said, pickpocketing is easily abused. Usually in public servers, it's disabled for a reason, because you used to be able to steal everything from somebody, and there's no limit, there's virtually no cooldown to it either. You just keep pressing the button, and if you have a high enough skill, there's nothing they can do to stop you. So in Arelith, they've made it so that it's still available to players, but with a caveat. So you you can't go willy-nilly and go crazy. Yes, I've been talking about this for quite a while now, and I believe it's I'm trying to keep this video quite short, but that's all I had to say on the matter this time. However, this isn't the only time that Alfred has been caught stealing. In fact, there's quite a lot that Alfred has been doing in his spare time. So next episode we'll be having a closer look at what riches can be found in other people's pockets. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, my name has been Juke, and this has been Neverwinter Nights. I will see you next time. Goodbye.